Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into Vistas and Voices. I'm your host, Tyler Garwood. Today, I sit down with Cam Ogilvie, who I've been fortunate enough to spend the day at work with in the field and learning from him and what he does. And now I get to sit down and discuss it with him in my living room. And so we had a great conversation about soil health and what that means to us as a society. And we just got to talk about so many interesting things and did it all in a new time frame of 30 minutes. I hope the 30 minutes is a great time for you. It's a nice little time for me. It makes editing a lot shorter. We got a lot in there in 30 minutes, so I think you'll enjoy it. Some of the topics we covered are soil health monitoring. What is soil health? How do you teach about soil health? Not letting perfect be the enemy of good. What's soil health going to look like in the not so distant future? And of course, the definition of dirt versus soil. What does it mean? Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll let you jump into the episode. Today, I'm here with Cam Ogilvie, and he is a soil health educator for the Soil Health Institute. I'm very fortunate to have worked with him all day today and been out in the field and get to see him prep for his day tomorrow. And I'll let him explain a little bit more about what you do as a soil health educator.
Hey, thanks. So I'm a soil health educator with a nonprofit called the Soil Health Institute. We're a global nonprofit committed to safeguarding and enhancing the vitality and productivity of soil through scientific research and advancement. And so we kind of work in three main areas, I'd say. One is, what are the best measurements of soil health? It's been a little bit of a wild west out there as far as what do you measure. And so we've been really trying to harmonize that and bring some standardization to soil health measurements. A second part of that is, well, once you know what measurements you're going to use, how do you know what a healthy test result is versus an unhealthy test result? And so that we call soil health benchmarking. You're probably familiar with it in the medical space, because when you go to your doctor's appointment, they check on a couple of things. You know, they put you on a scale, they do your heart rate, your blood pressure, standard things. They don't give you a full picture of your physical health, but they can give you kind of some snapshots, and they know these expected ranges that you should fall within that if you're a healthy individual. And right now, we don't have those expected ranges for soil health. So that's kind of another key part of what my organization does. And then specifically, my role is kind of an education. So outreach, working with farmers, food companies, agricultural companies, and other stakeholders to really kind of explain this work, explain the significance of soil health, train in areas where training is needed, and I'd say facilitate groups of farmers or staff who are working for any of these companies to really kind of facilitate those groups moving along the journey towards improving soil health.
That's a big mission. There's soil everywhere. Not everyone cares about soil. Not many people look down to notice soil.
It's true.
So how do you get people to care about soil?
Well, interestingly enough, most of my audience are people who already do have a strong interest in soil. So I spend a lot of my time talking with farmers. Soil is the foundation of their farming businesses, and then spend a lot of time working with food companies. And so, for them, I think they also recognize soil very much as the foundation of what they do. For the, general person, not connected to agriculture maybe at all, I find it significant that most, if not all, of the kind of ancient origin stories of humanity have some kind of connection between humans and the earth.
Mm.
So myself coming from like a Judeo-Christian worldview, man comes from the dust of the earth and life is breathed into his lungs. And so, there's this kind of a primal connection, I'd say, that we all have with the earth, and that is really maybe only in the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years since the majority of the world's population is now in cities that we've really lost that connection with the land. But, the indigenous peoples of Canada, certainly understand that connection. And I think at other times in human history, we've had much stronger connections to the land than we do today. So I don't think the link is too far off.
Mm-hmm. And soil health educator is a pretty unique title,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and a topic in which I think some people, if they weren't interested, would roll their eyes at.
Yeah.
Soil health, come on.
Uh-huh.
However, I find it fascinating. Like today's field work was awesome. Brought me back to my soil sampling days.
Great.
How did you get into this role? Like what made you interested in soil?
When I was 16, I had an experience in Haiti, where I was there on a kind of a development trip, serving in a rural village, and while I was there, was connected with an organization that was doing agricultural development work in Haiti, and I got really captivated and interested by what they were doing. So that's one snapshot for me. Another snapshot was reading a book in high school called "Cry the Beloved Country" by Allan Paton. Beautiful book. There's this small story towards the end of an agricultural development worker that comes to this community and really helps bring a community together around building strategies so that they can be more productive, so that the cows can produce milk to feed the children, so the children grow up healthy and strong, and food for the families, and so on and so forth. So that was another formative piece for me. And I guess it all really kind of came together when I went to study at the University of Guelph. I did an undergrad in agricultural science and a master's in plant agriculture. And it was there, I think, where I really grasped that, particularly in the developing world, where smallholder farmers, predominantly poor subsistence farmers, they don't have access to things like advanced crop genetics or fertilizers or pesticides to really optimize their crop production. They depend fundamentally and completely on the soil and what the soil can provide. And so there's this whole kind of sphere of thought around like low input agricultural systems. And the term really only exists because Western people talk about it. Those are just the normal systems for most of the world.
Okay.
But really they are systems that depend on the health and the functioning of soils. That's what soil health really is all about. It's about how well does a soil function compared to how well it could function. If you think about it in terms of human health, it's like, how do you know if you are a healthy individual or not? I think about my health in terms of, can I keep doing all the things that I love to do? And if I wasn't able to ride my bike, or if I wasn't able to play soccer or whatever, then that would indicate to me that something's wrong, something's not functioning properly here. So it's the same for soils. Soils need to cycle water and nutrients. They need to provide physical stability and support. They need to regulate pest and disease. They need to do all sorts of other things. And if any of those things isn't working properly, then that's where we kind of say, yeah, this soil isn't healthy.
Do you think that, well, you mentioned that we expect the soil to do a lot of these things. Do you think that our relationship with soil is based on reciprocity?
Whoa. I think it would be important to define who's we.
I guess the Western world.
Hmm. I don't think the Western world really has a calculus for the idea of reciprocity. And when I say the Western world, I more mean like Eurocentric kind of Western thought,
Yeah.
post Enlightenment, that kind of Western thought. Of course, the peoples of North America are very much steeped in a rich understanding of reciprocity. I think, as a product of an industrialist society, I don't think I was raised to think about reciprocity so much when it comes to soil. I think our agricultural systems tend to be more focused on production and efficiency. And I don't think that those things are inherently bad to think about. But I think the reciprocity idea is inherently a relational idea. And so that's where I think Western thought doesn't necessarily think about some of these things like the land as a being that we have a relationship with. But I think that adds a really rich dimension to thinking about our relationship with the land, is that it is one in which there is a mutual giving.
Yeah, because it fully supports us.
Yeah.
With your work that you do you see that there is a shift in the idea of reciprocity, that now we're starting to realize that our practices have begun, we've noticed the degradation that we've caused, and now like your position is to educate people on what healthy soils are, and if they don't have healthy soils, you teach them what they can do to stop or reverse that.
Yeah, man, there's a lot packed into that. I would say that, maybe the word reciprocity does not appear too much in the circles that I'm in, but the words that do appear are stewardship or caretaking. And, so while they're not entirely synonymous, I think there's hints of those things within them. But, another thing I'd just say to that question is like, there's many ways you can define education. What is an education? And there's formal ways to think about education. There's informal ways to think about it. I prefer to think about what I'm doing as trying to create moments of discovery for people, rather than cram information into people's heads. So my work is a lot of trying to illustrate concepts and ideas in very hands-on experiential demonstrations, so that people can have that aha moment for themselves. And, if I can just be there to encourage and facilitate that process along, rather than coming in as an expert and just expecting to have a captive audience. I know I got to build trust in order to create those moments of discovery.
Do you have a memorable moment of discovery where one of your audience members you just saw the light go on, or afterwards they just totally understood?
Yeah. I was doing a field day. I won't mention the region, but I was doing a field day with a group of growers in a region. And I do this one test. It's called a slump test. So soil, when it is, the soil gets organized into structures. And when those structures get exposed to water, that's really the test of how healthy that soil is. This water really reveals a lot about soil. So what I do is I go and I collect like an intact, you can kind of imagine it like a half foot by half foot by half foot cube of soil. And I put that in kind of a large strainer, and I set that in water for about a minute. And I usually do this when I've got two soils that I'm comparing different management. So the same soil type, but let's say the one field has been tilled a lot. Maybe it's had less of a diverse crop rotation. So maybe only one or two crops are being grown on this ground. It's being tilled a lot. There's no cover crops, plants that are being grown over the winter time or whatever to protect the soil from erosion. So it's kind of been more exposed. And I try to compare that with kind of a best case scenario where all the opposite is true. The soil is not being disturbed. There's no tillage. There's no chemicals, whatever. There's living roots in that soil 365 days a year, and that soil is covered with plant material, crop residue. Those two are kind of the two extremes. And if you dunk those in soil and you flip them out on a table, then this demonstration is, well, what happens? How much do those two slump? And I did this with this group of growers, and the one just became a big puddle. That was the one that was tilled a lot. And the other one really stayed in this block. And I asked the group, which soil has a compaction problem? And so they kind of hummed and hawed. And a few growers said, the soil that's standing up still, that's the one that has a compaction problem. And my response was, no, that is structure. That's not compaction. And it was actually the opposite. I had a group of agronomists who were out in the field with me the day before. They tried to stick the shovel into the ground, into that field that had been heavily tilled, and they couldn't get it in. It had a compaction issue. But compaction is an issue that shows up when there's no structure in the soil. And when there's no structure in the soil and you expose that soil to water, it slumps and it turns into a soupy mess. So there was this big aha moment for that group of farmers where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that structure looks like this, and that a lack of structure or compaction behaves this way when the field gets wet. So that's one of the moments that I kind of go back to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would initially think that the compaction would prevent water from getting in and stay together better. Right? Maybe that was their first thought as well. I'm not sure. And then you realize that it wasn't actually the case, that there's actually all these maybe like roots, and he said structure that hold the soil together under extremely wet circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really neat. Do you have a favorite, not moment or subject, but what is your favorite part about your job?
I think my favorite part about my job is really trying to find creative ways to tell the story. Trying to find new analogies that connect with people, trying to find new demonstrations that really bring a concept to life. I think I like that challenge. I like thinking creatively that way. And I like that for my job, I travel a fair bit, and I speak to different groups of farmers all over North America. And I kind of get to try out a message or an idea multiple times. And so I like that experience where, I'm not just giving a whole bunch of one-off talks. I'm actually getting to kind of repeat and hone my message a little bit more. I'm very much a recovering perfectionist. And so there's that perfectionist side of me that really loves being able to just, zone in on a perfectly and carefully crafted message. So,
Okay. What does, like a recovering perfectionist, what does the quote, don't let, what is it? Don't let,
great be the enemy of the good.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
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 Does that have significance for you then?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. My wife is a writer, and she came across a book called it's called Bird by Bird. It's about writing, a method for writing, and one of the very first chapters is called Shitty First Drafts, and that is something that I have really had to learn how to embrace. I've never written shitty first drafts. I always write final drafts because I can never handle looking at my terrible writing on a page. And I'm getting better at writing shitty first drafts because I think there's a lot of, I think another part of it too is just also realizing that a lot of people don't care about it being perfect. And so, it can pass as a solid 75%, and everybody nods their heads and goes, "Yeah, that's good." And then we all go home and I take a breather, and it didn't need to be 90.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other things that I could give my time to. There's also this other little kind of ebook that a friend of mine wrote called The Effectiveness Equation. And in it, there's this concept that he talks about as minimum viable product. What is the minimum viable product? What's the bare bones of what you need to accomplish to say that this thing is done? And then just do it to that level and move on. And that's been like a really big perspective shift for me. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everything has its place to be perfect.
Uh-huh.
Like, there are definitely some things you would like perfect, such as like the safety of your bicycle.
Right.
However, a draft that's going to be read once at a meeting,
Right,
may not need to have that same attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Where do you think that your job will take you in 10 or 15 years? What do you think? You think you'll be teaching the same concepts, or do you think that we'll have nailed those down?
Well, the concepts that I'm teaching are ones that we've been teaching for the past, well, at least in Canada and the US, we've been teaching them for probably over 100 years, and societies before have been talking about these concepts for thousands of years. So I don't think these concepts are going to go anywhere. Whether or not I'll be still doing that, I don't know. That's a good question. We're at an interesting point, I'd say, in Canada. Actually, Canada just passed legislation that I think is being referred to as the anti-greenwashing bill.
Oh, yeah.
And so now there's legislation in Canada that if companies are going to make sustainability claims, they need to back up those claims with measurements that are internationally recognized as being, valid methodology. And so I think, some of these changes, in addition to everything that's going on right now with conversation around climate change and mitigation and greenhouse reduction strategies, I don't think soil health is going anywhere. It's really at the foundation of a lot of these things. One of the best indicators of soil health is our soil carbon levels. Soil is the second largest sink of carbon next to the oceans, and so there is potential to manage the amount of carbon that is stored and sequestered in agricultural soils, either by tilling that soil to release all that carbon or by minimizing soil disturbance, minimizing tillage, planting cover crops, planting diverse crop rotations, and so increasing the amount of carbon that's stored in that soil. It's good for the environment. And it's also good for the soil. The big part of it that I don't think is going anywhere, especially with greenhouse gas emissions conversation, is nitrogen. As soils become healthier, they cycle more nutrients, and one of those really important nutrients is nitrogen. Currently, it was a product of industrialism that we developed a method for synthesizing nitrogen, ammonium fertilizer, through the Haber-Bosch process.
Yeah.
And that really unlocked a lot of potential in agriculture to produce really high yielding crops. One of the consequences of that is that there's a lot of energy and a lot of CO2 that is created in the process of creating nitrogen fertilizer. And it's one of the highest emissions from the field is nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide has 300 times the greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide. So very, very potent greenhouse gas. It's like the number one greenhouse gas issue in crop production. And so I think soil health, as it fits into that question of how can we reduce fertilizer use, is going to be really key. We're not going to be able to wean ourselves off of fertilizers as effectively if we aren't at the same time improving soil health, and so improving how well that soil can cycle nutrients like nitrogen.
So you are doing some very important work ultimately in the long run. And now, it's, would you say the soil has an efficiency? Because you said it cycles more nutrients as it's healthier. So is there a measure of efficiency? Is that even the correct terminology?
Yeah, you can measure efficiency at a couple of different levels. You can measure nutrient use efficiency of plants. That typically is an idea of, the proportion of applied nutrient that is taken up and used by the plant. But if you wanted to think about efficiency in the soil, we actually talk more about microbial use efficiency, where it's actually about how efficient are microbes, soil organisms, at breaking down the different organic materials that are in the soil and turning those into biomass. So you can think about, grasses or leaves that get left in the field after it's been harvested. Those don't just break down magically. It's microbes who are involved in that process, and depending on the nutritional makeup of that plant material, and depending on the microbes that are trying to break that down, there are efficiencies in that process as well. Some microbes are more efficient at breaking down certain types of plant material than others. So that's two sides of the efficiency coin.
Okay. The soil seems endlessly fascinating. I learn things about it every day. And I think that most people see it as dirt, like lifeless and there, versus active, filled with life.
Right.
And I think that's even just a switch, just a shift in perspective to seeing it as something that is, has the capacity to build life and is itself part of a life cycle.
Yes.
We'll be there.
Yes.
So,
Soil is a living system.
Yeah.
There are more microbes in a teaspoon of soil than there are people on the planet. So soil is teeming with life, and it is far from just being useless dirt.
Yeah,
it is very, very much alive.
What is your definition of dirt versus soil? We'll wrap this up.
Well, dirt, I think a lot of people I'm okay with using dirt as in that's the stuff that you sweep up in your house,
Yeah.
but soil is an incredibly precious resource.
Yeah.
You don't realize the value of something until it's gone. There's plenty of civilizations around the world that have fallen to pieces because they degraded their soil. So we really do come from the soil and return to the soil as well.
Yeah, definitely. Everything we rely on comes from soil.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Cam. Well, I have one last question for you.
Mm.
What is one thing you would like listeners to take away from this conversation? On a final note.
I think I'd love listeners to, I hope that you're taking away from this that soil is a really interesting and exciting topic. It's a really interesting and exciting science. And there's lots of opportunity to work in this space right now. I know that my alma mater, the University of Guelph, was really, really proud to say that there were 3 to 4 jobs for every agricultural science graduate or every environmental science graduate out of the college. And so it's just a really booming space right now. Lots of excitement, lots of really interesting work happening. And so, come join in, get your hands dirty.
Get your hands dirty. I love it. And do you have a resource to add to that excitement in soil? If someone doesn't know anything, what's the first place you would direct them?
Yeah, I think you should check out the Soil Health Institute's website, see some of the work that we're up to. That's soilhealthinstitute.org. In my work before this job, I was working for an initiative at the University of Guelph called Soilsatguelph. And so you can also check that out, Soilsatguelph.ca. And there should be some great resources there between those two.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cam. And we'll get our hands dirty.
Right on.
Sounds good.
Get to it.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Vistas and Voices. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Cam Ogilvie. He is a great person, and I really enjoyed that conversation. Even editing it and going back and listening to it again, there are so many little tidbits that I did not pick up on the first time while I was in the conversation. So it makes me happy that I get to go back and be able to do this. If you enjoyed the conversation, I would really appreciate it if you could share it with somebody that you would think would appreciate it. Share it however you like to share things, or leave a review wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. That would mean a lot to me, and it would help spread the message of Vistas and Voices and let more people listen to it. And I think that would just be one of the coolest things there is. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. I look forward to seeing you here next time on Vistas and Voices.